Everyone.
Morning.
Hey, oh, quite a few people on. Wonderful. What are? Okay.
I've got a few more people coming.
Good.
Yeah. And it does say, I'm sure we'll get a few more after that.
While we're just having conversation, I thought I'd introduce myself to Kit Gage. I see it's already on. Kit, I'm one of your neighbors. I live in Silver Spring. I forget the name of the neighborhood, but I became familiar with your name when we were doing the mosquito trap circulation through our community, Suica. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Get traps.
Yeah. I think we were using your example and what you've done in the neighborhood that you live in, and doing it in this neighborhood. We were really successful with 800 traps that we ordered for the community.
Are you
over
in
800?
Yes,
Suica. That's why I said Suica.
Yeah,
that's right. I don't know. I forget what it stands for sometimes.
South of Evanswood something community association.
Yeah.
My older daughter lives in that neighborhood.
Yes, I remember that as well, having worked on the effort. Yeah. Right. So
no, that's been really interesting, and it sort of encourages people to talk to each other more and do the most basic stuff of removing standing water from places you don't think to look for it, like pot holders.
Yes, right. Yeah, it was good. I had just moved here, so when I started working on it, so it's a good way to meet people as well.
Right.
Yeah, thanks.
It's one of those
things. Do we want to get started?
Well, I was hoping that Rabbi Daria would be on because
she is on. Rabbi, she's here.
Oh, okay, great.
She's here.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where she is right now, but I saw her moments ago.
Yeah, me too.
She's the name of listing. I did see her face.
She's coming in. I just admitted her again.
Terrific. There she is. Sure, then we will get started. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today to hear about why plant native. Please make sure your Zoom connection is muted. I am Linda Solomon. Sue Berger and I are the co-chairs for the Oseh Shalom Sacred Grounds team. Sacred Grounds is a program run by the National Wildlife Federation to educate and encourage faith communities to plant native plants. Our hardworking team members are listed in the chat. Thank you to our team members, always looking for more. Our team includes Rabbi Daria. She provides guidance and ideas that enable the team to reach our goals. During today's presentation, we will hear from 3 speakers, Rabbi Daria, Naomi Edelson, and Kit Gage. Our own Rabbi Daria will provide an opening blessing and present the connection between Judaism and the environment. Rabbi Daria Jacobsveld was raised in Greater Boston and journeyed from being a cultural Jew during her youth to developing a deep connection with Judaism. She sought the answer to the question, why be Jewish? The journey took her to Israel and Japan. She completed an education master's at Harvard University and a bachelor's of art in sociology from Brandeis University. Rabbi Daria was ordained as the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. Rabbi Daria loves the opportunities to see things from new angles and to teach learners of all ages and to share with the community new ways to make Judaism relevant personally through outdoor activities, dancing, singing, chanting, drumming, or yoga. Rabbi Daria and her husband, Rabbi Josh Jacobsveld, joined Oseh Shalom in August 2017. Together, they guide the Oseh Shalom community in learning, playing, doing, and prayers. Naomi Edelson is the Senior Director for Wildlife Partnerships at the National Wildlife Federation. She will lead the discussion about why plant native and describe the Sacred Grounds program, the wildlife crisis, and the solution. Naomi is a wildlife biologist with a Master's of Science from the University of Florida, where she studied wading birds and wetlands, and a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Naomi is an inspirational leader and innovator in the wildlife conservation community. Naomi has many achievements. We will highlight a few of them. As Senior Director for Wildlife Partnerships in National Wildlife Federation, Naomi leads partnerships with state wildlife agencies and other state-based partners. Working with these partnerships, Naomi has secured greater funding to prevent wildlife from becoming endangered, made legislative achievements, improved communications, and led grassroots efforts. One federal legislative achievement is the Recovering America's Wildlife Act campaign. Naomi developed a toolkit for wildlife leaders on strengthening state wildlife agencies. The toolkit includes tips, tools, case studies, and describes methods to secure state-level funding for wildlife. Naomi works with the Gardening for Wildlife program to restore wildlife habitat where people live, work, learn, play, and worship. Naomi created the Native Plant Finder. Naomi also established Sacred Grounds, a program for faith communities. Check the chat for the links to these programs and tools. Following Naomi's presentation, we will hear from Kit Gage. Kit Gage owns her own business, Gardener's Advisor. Kit will discuss the health of some of the local waterways and problems with stormwater runoff, what we can do, and the importance of native plants. Kit has a career in civil liberties and human rights and switched to environmentalism in 2005. She started volunteering with Friends of Sligo Creek on their stormwater committee and obtained a horticultural certificate from the Graduate School, USA. Kit became She became a master waster watershed steward, then started helping and run the National Capital Region Watershed Stewards Academy. This academy offers coursework to learn how to mitigate problems of stormwater in cities by using conservation landscapes, rain barrows, cisterns, and more. Kit became a Chesapeake Bay landscape professional and has been doing garden advising for 10 years. She became president and then advocacy director of the Friends of Sligo Creek and has completed many tours, speaking engagements, and testimony on a myriad subjects. Most of them related to stormwaters, native plants, green infrastructure, trees, and native plant gardenings. Kit has supervised a number of institutional stormwater projects, often acting as liaison and translator between community and engineers. Sue Berger, my co-chair, will wrap up our presentation with a summary of the Oseh Shalom team's goals and our future events. Today's presentation concludes with a question and answer period. You're welcome to stay and converse with our speakers. At this time, please give your attention to Rabbi Daria.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda. Let's be a little activated and interactive and give our little Oseh thank you, especially over Zoom as we move back into our Zoom focused life that we are presently in. So I just invite you to thank you, Sue. Yes, even if you're showing the hands, it doesn't have to be the whole face at times. It makes a big difference. And welcome also to Caitlin Mclaughlin, our new cantor. So glad that you're able to join us this morning. And we have parents here, we have people who are not in the congregation, and so are not yet. So people from all over who are joining us today. And I want us to I just invite us to look around and see who's decided to take an hour of their day and come join this webinar. And just kind of feel into what the intentions, the hopes, the curiosities are that we might hold around who else is on this screen right now. There's so many things we each could be doing, and we are deciding to come here right now. So we can just, take a breath. As you know, I invite us to do regularly. Those of us who regularly take deep breaths, kol hakavod, way to go. And for those of us who sometimes need reminders, there you have one. So I'm just really humbled and honored at this moment to be here, and to be here with all of you, and to think about everything that went into this moment. And the little bit that I know is such deep gratitude for Naomi Edelson, who we know from a non-professional context when we were talking, and she said, wait a minute, you guys are in Prince George's County. I'm doing this amazing work, and we need people in Prince George's County who might be interested in this work. I said, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. What a perfect fit. And then from that initial conversation, reaching out to others at Oseh Shalom, who I thought also might be really excited about this process. And we are here now, right? After months of lots of work by different people in different amounts, but to make a space for all of us who are here at this moment, 30, right? 31 at least, because I see Caitlin's got her partner there, and perhaps some of you are also twosomes in the behind the Zoom screen that we can see. And certainly there are others in your lives who will be impacted by this work, even if they are not on the Zoom screen. But just right from all of Naomi's work and her one individual, and then the two of us talking, and then me and the, bringing together and identifying this team of amazing leaders who spent so much time preparing for today and envisioning what this year can be at Oseh Shalom, and then all the potential that each one of you hold. Like, it's such a tikkun olam piece, just that kind of activation of a dream. And the dream that's so Jewish, the dream that says, Shema, listen up. Listen up. Will we just wake up and listen up? Because you know what? Hashem echad. Echad, one. Super simple word, super simple to represent on the fan, right? And yet when we look out at the world, so many of us in our lives, we're so distracted by what looks like separation. Look, there's me, and there's you, and there's all these individual people, and there's desks, and there's computers, and there's trees, and there's windows, and there's light, and there's like too much light, and there's problems, and there's hope. There's so much separation. But maybe that's really not true. Maybe our deep prayer and teaching of Judaism that says, Echad. The separation is just part of the lenses that we wear when we walk through the world in our physical bodies that have arms and hair and eyes and faces and legs and torsos and all the organs inside. But our organs inside and our whole body needs to be working together for us to be maximally working. And whatever Naomi does by herself, she can only do this much by herself. But when she connects to other people, and when she activates that flow, and then I activate that flow, and then we activate that flow, then we can see that the human beings are actually all one. And what we do to ourselves is what we do to one another. And what we activate and what we see in ourselves is what we can see in one another, that potential, the possibility, and what we see when we interact with the world around us, and the awareness that we can open our eyes with. That potential can ignite such beauty and growth and bring us back to the Garden of Eden that we are told in the beginning of creation, that the Garden of Eden is a place that we are supposed to l'shomra, guard it, protect it, and tend it, ovda. And so what do we do with this natural world that's part of us, that we are part of, that we are human beings, we are Adam, that first human being who comes from the Adamah, who comes from the earth. On this day, our congregational noting of Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat is next week. We'll keep watching the moon and you'll see the full moon growing, and so we'll know it's Tu B'Shvat next week. But OSRS is commemorating and connecting with Tu B'Shvat today, and here as adults we also have that opportunity to connect with Tu B'Shvat, right? The Jewish environmental day, as it became known as in the 70s, but has deep ancient roots to the trees, to the natural world, to noting their time, their lifespan, their birth, their process of growing. So on this day, we get to bring our attention and our awareness to learn more about what our relationship might be like. How might we appropriately tend this amazing world that we have? How can we open our eyes? Pokeach ivrim, the morning blessings tell us. We open the eyes of the blind so we can see, oh, what is this world around us, and how can we increase our consciousness? Judaism is a practice of increasing consciousness and self-reflection. How can I see the world in new ways and know what this tree, is this tree the best tree to be planting right here? Are these the best shrubs? What are the flowers that help connect us in a holistic way? So that's the opportunity that we have today. Such amazing power and potential, and I'm so honored to have been a part of this moment that will help us through the arc of what we do today with this learning about our relationship with native plants a little bit more. And then in the springtime we're going to have another webinar where it's not just us but other Prince George's County congregations that we are also doing this work simultaneously with. We're going to have interfaith component of learning about how to plant natives is with simple language, but it's not just about planting natives. It's about also understanding how what we put into the earth and what we're tending, is that next layer of what are we doing with water? How does that impact the water, as Kit will talk about, right? And how can we understand a deeper nuance to not just how to, put some little growing thing into the earth and yalla, get on with it, right? But there's going to be a wonderful opportunity then. And then in May, we're going to have an opportunity where we will have received, thanks to Naomi's work, over $1,200 Osei Shalom will have received, so that we can support each one of you and so many others that we hope you will share these opportunities with as well. And we'll of course continue to do it through the regular Osei PR means, that we'll have the opportunity to be able to give away actual plants and support you in actually putting plants into the earth in your own home areas, as well as, of course, increasing signage at Osei and continuing to beautify and maximize the power and potential of what Osei has in its hands of sorts, its grounds. So with all of that, I just invite us to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Just again, connecting to your body and your own intentions, whatever it was that sparked your coming this morning. Why you decided again to carve out this time, what you knew, what you were curious about. We are part of something magnificent at Osei Shalom, and those of us who are coming here to really continue to pollinate, spread the seeds, through our learning today, and through the actions we hopefully will be inspired to take and be supported in as we go through this process, the sacred grounds process. Na'aseh v'nishma, let us act and let us understand more deeply, Shema, that we are all interconnected. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu chei ha'olamim. Blessings of gratitude and acknowledgement for the life energy that flows through all the worlds. It flows through all the worlds. And the opportunity that we have to tap into that, to be invigorated, and to continue to expand that energy and grow that energy through our very presence and all the actions we may take. Let us unmute so that we can say with our hands and with our words, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Edelson to take it from here.
Hey, thank you, Rabbi Daria. I'm Naomi Edelson, and I'm with the National Wildlife Federation, and I want to welcome everyone again to this, our first in 2022 series, where we're working with up to 12 congregations in the Washington, D.C. area, and we're thrilled to be still pioneering this work with Oseh Shalom. And we are going to talk today about, we hope to inspire you to plant local native plants at home and on your congregation grounds. And this is simply a project, as Rabbi Daria described so eloquently, that helps people and wildlife. And so we're going to share with you some information, and we're going to encourage you through Oseh Shalom's amazing Sacred Grounds committee to take action. And we'll hear more about that later, but there's lots of ways you can participate in this, and it will take all of us together to really make a difference and reverse the, restore the earth to what the damage we're doing through climate change and many other ways. But there's a lot of hope out there. There's a lot of ways we can do that. And this is one of the simple ways we can do it, but we have to do it at scale, which does take all of us together doing it. So I'm very glad to be here. And I'm going to turn it over. We're going to talk about the problem right here in our region, and we're going to talk about the solution. So I'm going to turn it over to Kit Gage, who's our watershed expert, and she's going to explain some of the problems here. And then I'm going to walk through some of what we're doing to help your congregation and what you're doing to help us, again, working with everyone together.
Okay, let's see. I'm sharing. Let me get to my there we go, slideshow. You all see that? Cool. As you heard, I'm really grateful to be here. Let me just second what Naomi said. We've been partners in this adventure for some time now, and let me say it's so wonderful to do this work collaboratively across religious lines, more than just individuals, but I love that this work gets shared in such a broad way. So it's not just one-on-one, but it's we feel like we're getting to have partners all over the place, and it's really remarkable. So with that said, it's not only is it remarkable, but it's more effective. I mean, really, to the point of we've got a huge problem, and how do we figure out how to address it? And the best way is to do it collaboratively with lots of people roughly at the same time. I'm, as you know, with Friends of Sligo Creek, and I'm going to start out the slideshow with Sligo Creek as an example, which is appropriate to just about anywhere on the east of the Mississippi. But then I'm going to go specific to the Patuxent and give a little bit more detail there. And some of you may know some of this. I'm going to go through the slides pretty quickly. This is our example, and you can see on the left picture, the dark green, that's the little Sligo watershed. It's a teeny little watershed in the larger Anacostia watershed, which abuts the Patuxent watershed to the east largely. And you can see on the right that whole Chesapeake Bay watershed, which obviously includes y'all, as well as the Potomac River watershed again to the west of you. And the watershed's important. For those who don't know what a watershed is, if you have a drop of water falling on any of those dark green places, it's going to soak into the ground and eventually end up probably in Sligo Creek, which then goes into the larger watershed. So it's the land area that drains into a creek or a river. And Sligo Creek this is Sligo Creek Park, and it's a it's a skinny little creek. It is beautiful and damaged. It has walkway and a road near it, which make it both more damaged, but also it brings people together to try to help it because they walk it, they see it, they play with branches and rocks in the water. Come on. That's not good. Oh, hold on. Let me see if this is okay. And oddly enough, there's a lot of really interesting other things other than people who live in and near it, including fox, including a yellow-crowned night heron on the right, which is one of my favorite birds, which nest in Sligo Creek and eat crawdads that oddly live in the creek. And there's lots of fun fish. And the cool thing about it is that after a serious decline in the 80s, we now have many more species of fish that are succeeding in living in this little somewhat threatened creek. Not only fish, but eels on the left, as you see, and salamanders on the right. It's a complicated effort to try to help this stuff survive because of what's going on next to it. And so here you see, we were all, before Europeans came here, we were largely, we looked like what it looks like on the left, where rain falls on the trees, slows down the water, flows gently and soaks into the ground, which filters it and slows its eventual flow into a creek or a river. The more we have paved and the more people we are and the more we build structures, the more that doesn't happen anymore. And instead water flows much more quickly in greater volume, and collecting pollutants on the way to go into those water bodies. And you end up with a lot more drought and flood at pretty much alternating, as compared with a much more gradual flow, which is what we had when we were all trees. This in Sligo, right near where I live, is what happens. And now this is a floodplain, so it's supposed to do this, but it isn't. You can see that the chart on the right, we have a U.S. Geological Survey measuring station just downstream from me, and in fact I can measure what rain we got at my house, and then I see what happens to the creek, and you can see that this little creek, that from that top chart, you can see that the typical flow is less than 2 cubic feet per second, and in a couple inches, 2-3 inch rainstorm, it gets up to 2,000 cubic feet per second. Imagine the difference. And you see the same kind of thing in the height of that creek, going from a little over a foot to much higher. I mean, basically unmeasurable by the USGS materials. So here's the flooding in the center, but here's some of the solutions to the left and the right. The more you can plant shrubs and trees and have catchment areas, like in the middle picture, or even have things on the bottom left, like pervious pavers, where it facilitates the flow into the ground. And really, on the top right, one of the most important things is trees, because of how much they will absorb stormwater, getting back to the original situation. But even things as relatively simple that you don't think are going to do much, like a rain barrel on the bottom right, importantly, what that does, rather than saying you use it to water your vegetable garden, what I like to think of it more is it slows down the flow. So you capture that water and then you let it out gradually, after the big rain has fallen, so it has a chance to be absorbed into your garden. Like many groups like ours, we do a lot of removal of trash and recycled materials, which helps, except that we're catching them at the very end rather than preventing them, which is much to be advised. We check on water quality. We see what's living in the creek. We take invasive plants, and this is a huge issue. We try to remove invasive plants as volunteers all over the creek and all over the counties. And people say, well, what's wrong with those vines with ivy and the evil tear thumb? And the biggest answer is, and the most important answer is, they kill trees. So getting back to the point about how important trees are, you really want to try to remove invasive vines almost more than any other kind of invasive plant because of that critical role that trees play. Pollutants, again, we have a program, a water watchdog program for Friends of Sligo Creek to try to immediately notify the county when there are pollutants in the creek to try to stop them before they kill whatever's left in the creek. We have programs, we have kiosks all up and down the creek, we have bike rides, lots of different kinds of things. And again, all going toward the same idea of this program of educating more than one person at a time, but also enlisting them to do the work that we all need to do. And as you can see from this, there's a lot of different kinds of work. También hablamos en español para los que viven en nuestra biome. So we try to reach out to people beyond the easiest folks to get. We reach out in different languages and people in different circumstances. These are just, just a couple samples of some of the things that live in our watershed and support the larger biome. These are examples of projects in the park itself, which we've helped to stimulate parks to install. These are examples in our neighborhood of projects, and we'll be doing, we did a walk, I'm sure some of you went on the walk in the fall at the library in Laurel, where we saw all those fabulous plants growing that really make that big building the equivalent of net zero, to catch all the water that's coming off of the roof of that building, so that it doesn't pollute anywhere. So here we have your watershed. You can see it's longer and skinnier. I'm sure many of you have seen this or know about this and know that it's the longest river that's just in Maryland. I've got a bunch of data on here, which I won't read entirely, but I'm happy to share this PowerPoint later. But basically, it's, as I was looking at the Patuxent and maybe how it varies from the Anacostia or or other rivers, it's interesting in that it's relatively pristine upstream, and it is relatively very damaged. It gets a D grade, sort of on the lower part of it, which is very, which is sad and hard to see. But you can tell that one of the reasons it does that is it's got a lot of different it's got a lot more people sort of on the lower end, and it's got a lot more stuff that will help to pollute. And interestingly, it's that it's, I believe my water in Silver Spring, my drinking water, comes from the Patuxent from what I remember from seeing the maps. So, you know, your water is going to a lot of places beyond what you're drinking. And we have to recognize the Algonquian people who lived in this general area and in the Patuxent area, who took care of that river better than we have. There have been a number of studies. There's been a bunch of activity. I expect you know about the Patuxent Riverkeeper, and if you don't, you should, because they have over a really long period of time done a lot of important work, especially in communities of color, to try to improve the quality of the water. And as has happened in a lot of places, as population has grown, it used to be that your pollution, the nitrogen, phosphorus that can be really damaging in excess, is decreasing from agriculture, but it's increasing from septic systems and impervious surfaces. So one of the core reasons to try to do that is because at the outfall of the Patuxent, you've got an incredible crab, oyster habitats, and those get severely damaged by too much silt. I mean, just even people think silt is fine and volume of water is fine, but it's really not. And certainly the nitrogen phosphorus that tend to cause algal blooms, which kill a lot of shellfish and other things at the base of the river, are really a problem. Here are just a few resources. Fred Tutman has long been the leader, I think 20 years now, of Patuxent Riverkeeper, and he's an amazing guy. And I guess one of the things that I was struck by, and I think Naomi was too, is there seemed to be, you know, and maybe I'm missing them, but to the extent that I could see them, there's somewhat fewer studies and evaluation of the Patuxent than of some other water bodies, and I think that's, you know, in the larger scheme of things, something that it makes sense for you all to help to figure out how to address, which may be working with Fred or other folks, maybe even in the Sacred Grounds group that we've helped, that you all are helping to establish. And I think that's it. Okay, you're now back.
Okay, thank you, Kit. I am going to share my screen right now. So we do have a problem. I mean, these rivers have need our help dramatically, and they're our source of water and they're our source of life. And we can do things to help. That's the important thing. There's a growing movement, and you are about to be part of it if you aren't already. So let me just make sure, hold on. Why is this? You could see my, hold on. Okay, you can see my screen, right? Somebody shake their hands. Yes, all right. So I'm going to walk through this fast. I have a lot of slides to show you. But, and again, this is really meant to inspire you more than for you to take detailed notes. We will share all this information, so just let yourself absorb it all, and we will walk through it. So the idea is to plant native plants to help people and wildlife. And the National Wildlife Federation has had a program to do this since 1973. It's quite amazing. There was insightful people back then to really say we can do something at home and garden for wildlife. And we now do that where we do it where people live, work, play, learn, and most recently worship, so-called worship. And this was actually my rabbi's idea. Even though I'm called the founder, it was actually Rabbi Fred Daub I'm a member of a Dot Shalom Reconstructionist congregation. It was his idea. We met with him and he said, why don't you do this with congregations? We were like, oh, that's so obvious. What a great idea. And the idea again is to plant native plants for people and wildlife. And here's a picture of my son, Rafi, who's now 14, but here's the start of a garden of native plants at a Dot Shalom. And I'll show you some more pictures. And native plants are simply a species that has evolved in a given region over thousands of years, and it thrives in natural soils, precipitation, weather, and the climate of that region. And of course, there is an issue with our climate changing, but the key here is that native plants and native wildlife rely on each other, and really we rely on all of them for our survival. And here's some pictures to show how beautiful they are. So we're going to talk about why you should do it, how you can do it at home, and how you can help our community, our larger community. Most of us don't live in homes like this, but certainly plenty do in this region. And this is part of the problem. We have usurped so much of the natural world that we really can't rely just on our parks and the different public grounds that have been set aside for conservation. We need to create functioning habitat at our homes. And look at this opportunity here. You can see what a problem it is, but you can see what an opportunity it is. And it really is about connected with water. It isn't just about wildlife, but it's about how we're all surviving together in, it's that circle of life you can see right here. Oops, somebody's trying to get into the waiting room. I'll hit admit since I can. Okay. Uh-oh, I shouldn't have. Oh, so here is one of our major rivers. This is actually the Anacostia River, which is another one of the big rivers that flows into the Chesapeake Bay. And it's a beautiful river, but it was considered one of the top 10 degraded rivers in trouble in the whole country until recently. And on this river, just like all of our regional areas, we have wildlife which survive because of the fish in the river. Here's a beautiful great blue heron that are common in the area, so you should be able to see it. And of course, we have people who use the river to eat the fish as well, either for fun and in some cases for subsistence as well. Some people use it to supplement their food, but it is the river, because it's been unhealthy, is actually unhealthy to eat most of the fish. And this is what happens after big floods. This is further down towards the Navy Yard in DC, which many of us have been to. But look what happens when we let our stuff all go down the river. This is downstream. And that is not good for our wildlife. And here's some examples of the flooding that Kit was talking about. Huge problems in this in our era of climate change, flooding everywhere. Our systems, our streets, our water, you could see it running in, was never built to handle this much precipitation. And in our region, that's what climate change looks like. More precipitation, more frequently, and with much more intensity. And our system can't handle it. We've had major problems all across the country and of course, all across the world. Monarchs have declined dramatically. One of the most abundant species, very common, people could see it. We're at 98% decline in monarch butterflies. And birds, many of you have heard these stories. There's been a study done from 1970. We have lost individually 2.9 billion birds, including the beautiful meadowlark, which is throughout the East and the West. In fact, we have 12,000 species listed by all the state wildlife agencies as species of greatest conservation need, meaning they need proactive conservation attention to avoid them from becoming endangered. And again, why and what can we do about it? Wildlife needs 4 things to survive: food, water, cover, and places to raise young. Most important one is really food. And we think of food, especially right now in the winter, as if we put up a bird feeder, we will help our birds. But in fact, what birds really need are in the spring and during migration, when their protein needs are the highest, when that's really their do or make or break time, when they're trying to create babies and such, they actually need invertebrates like caterpillars to feed their young. In fact, it's quite shocking, but chickadees need up to 9,000 caterpillars in a 3-week period to feed their young. Isn't that amazing? 9,000 caterpillars. I can't even still wrap my head around how that could possibly be possible. So it turns out if you want to help wildlife and you like to feed birds, that you really need to build a better bird feeder. And 90% of the insects that eat plants can only eat specific plants. Those are the ones that have co-evolved with them. And if those plants are absent from our landscapes, so will be the bird food that they produce. And according to Dr. Doug Tallamy, a professor at University of Delaware, who's really been an amazing ambassador all over the country, he has done many studies, and we'll share more of this information, but he found, looking at one particular date, that you can see which trees are better host plants for caterpillars. And look at oak, how many species and how many numbers, 233 caterpillars. Think about that chickadee trying to get 9,000 caterpillars in a 3-week period. But if you look at Bradford Pear, which is a very common tree that's often been planted in our towns, was only one species and one caterpillar. That is not bird food. And you can see that also with our other native plants. Goldenrod and asters are what I call the super plants. Doug calls them the keystone plants. But they are, look how much more caterpillars they produce. But still, something like black-eyed Susan is still actually very important. But compared to non-native plants that we mostly have from Asia and Africa and Europe, they really are not host plants to caterpillars. Here's something I took just in my own yard. When I put in some milkweed, look what happened. I got this beautiful butterfly to use it for nectar. So they not only do they need it for the as a host plant when they're at the caterpillar stage, but when they transform, this miraculous thing, when they transform into butterflies, they also rely on these native plants. But it's not only about the wildlife, it goes back to the stormwater. It turns out most native plants have longer and deeper roots, and they slow the flow like Kit talked about. They hold the water longer and they filter it before it goes into our creeks and rivers. So they have a double job of helping wildlife and water. And of course, we know that trees are beautiful and we always want them in our yards, but that they turn into taller plants that will provide shade and are really going to help us by cooling down the earth and storing carbon. On the left is a picture of my rabbi's daughter, who's now 17, and we did a big tree planting day at Adat Shalom. But on the right is a dogwood, which is a beautiful native tree that is very good to plant in our region. Now, these native plants are good for soil, precipitation, and with wildlife. And really, it's very clear that native plants are better and they're beautiful, but you can't find them easily in our nurseries. And there's been a growing movement to make them more available. They're not what we're conditioned to plant at home or on our congregation grounds. It used to be that congregations would, in fact, create certified wildlife habitat. And here's a synagogue in Rye where National Wildlife Federation, if you just created the habitat, you would get so-called certified. But since then, again, at my rabbi's suggestion, we created a full-fledged program aimed at congregations to not just create wildlife habitat, but to make that connection like Rabbi Daria did between faith and the environment, which all religions have, and to engage the congregation and then to reach beyond. And there's different ways we're working with your congregation to do that right now. And we picked this really because congregations typically And yours is an example, have much bigger grounds than homes do. You can obviously reach a lot of people at once, and your leaders in the community. And we'll talk more about that with one of the churches we're working with in your region is St. Mark's United Methodist Church. And they're amazing. They have phenomenal relationships in Laurel. And obviously, again, it's a great project to be able to give back to your neighbors and be more visible in your community. And another congregation, we're working with two mosques, and both of them, because of the discrimination against Muslims, they very much want to be visible in the community and share their leadership and be an inspiration to people, to help people understand that they're not terrorists, to be blunt. It's a horrible thing that happened after 9/11, and they're very eager to be visible, good neighbors. You can also, doing this is all good for many, many reasons, from climate change, and you can save money. So here's an example at my synagogue, as I said, Adat Shalom. It's over by Glen Echo, near the Potomac River and the C&O Canal in Bethesda. And here's a picture of Rabbi Fred in the middle. And we had an amazing planting day at our grounds. And here he is doing something similar to Rabbi Daria, giving a blessing over the site before we planted it. This is what it used to look like. We had this big stormwater area to collect the water. And in fact, it does flood there. This is like very common. It's supposed to be the 100-year flood, but this happens now all the time, our stormwater area. And we found out that actually Montgomery County offers an amazing financial rebate to congregations who put in landscaping to help slow the flow. And actually they give up to $20,000. So and if you live in Montgomery County, turns out you can get up to $7,500 rebate to do this at your home. This is how big a problem it is and how important this is as a solution. So I'm going to talk about the other counties, but I know you also have members in Montgomery County. And so we used some of our money to buy 2,500 native plants. And we had a huge family planting day. It was a big success. Here's some of the plants. And then we started working with other congregations. Here's a church in Anacostia, by the Anacostia River, East Washington Heights Baptist Church. This pastor is amazing. We're still working with him. We're doing another project. And we worked with a Lutheran church in Gaithersburg and did a great project. And they came up with all kinds of ideas of how to engage their young people. And Silver Spring United Methodist Church also took this on and put in a beautiful rain garden right at their entrance. And so our project now, Sacred Grounds, we have expanded it and we're caring for the Anacostia River, Sligo Creek, and the Upper Patuxent River. And your congregation is the closest, is right near the Upper Patuxent River, as are the others in Prince George's County. So we're working with 12 we're at the final stages of recruiting 2 more, and then we'll have 12 congregations working together to be ambassadors. So far we have 4 in Prince George's, 4+ in Montgomery County, and we have 2 in District of Columbia by the Anacostia River, but we just got another grant, so we're expanding it to 2 more. And here's an example of your congregation, Oseh Shalom, working with the St. Mark's United Methodist Church, who's one of our other congregations. And Rabbi Josh reached out to them, as he did to the Islamic Community Center in Laurel, and they both agreed to be part of the Prince George's cohort, which is terrific. And this church, if you might recognize it, you will from now on, is right across from the library in Laurel. And it's amazing. They have a great team of folks working on it there. And we're also working with a Catholic church on the Prince George's Montgomery County line in Tacoma Park and St. Camilla's, and they have a very diverse congregation of lots of different kinds of people. They have 20,000 people with that congregation. It kind of is amazing. And St. Francis is right on their walls, so it's a perfect example of caring for creation. And here we're working with another mosque, as I said, over in Montgomery County. This is the Imam Center. They have their webinar in a couple weeks. And here's the church we worked with, their garden in Anacostia, planting this summer. Goal is to get up to 200 homes to plant native plants. And we're doing a lot of different things. You already have a strong, robust Sacred Grounds team. In fact, the best in the whole region. It's really phenomenal. And you've had an action plan, which we'll hear more about. And part of that effort is to host a presentation like today. And we're going to help you do this as we enter into this year, where we have a lot of conservation and outreach expertise. We have materials we're going to share you. We're going to give away native plants to all of you who pledge to plant native plants. And we're going to, as Daria said, we have $1,200 to give each participating congregation to. We have a lot of partners in this. It's not just us. We're working with Interfaith Power and Light, Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. The Chesapeake Bay Trust is funding this through Prince George's County and Montgomery County and the District of Columbia. And we also just got a grant from the Wildlife Conservation Society. This is the plan for this year. We are doing webinars to encourage people, to inspire people to plant native plants, and that's in January and February. We're doing a big workshop. I'll talk about that in a minute. In April, we hope to do another walking tour to show you what some of these gardens look like. We're going to give away some plants, and then when you decide you're going to do this, we're going to help you plant a garden at your congregation grounds. And then we hope to get 100 to 200 homes to make this pledge by the end of June for this region. So in April, looking at the first week of April, we should settle on a date next week. We're going to have more of a how to do this. And it's about how to use native plants to create rain gardens and wildlife habitat at home. We're going to do one for Prince George's County and one for Montgomery. You could join either, depending on where you live. And it's going to talk about selecting and installing native plants. We're going to give you lists of plants that you can do and talk about how to actually create rain gardens, which are a little bit more complicated. And we're going to talk about the financial incentives, where to buy them. They aren't always available easily, so we're going to tell you where to get them. We have that information and which ones. And Prince George's County, when we do that workshop, they're going to talk specifically about what their rebates are. Prince George's and Montgomery County have two of the best financial incentive programs in the whole country. And they will give you, again, a huge amount of money potentially if you use native plants and do other stormwater best practices. Anne Arundel and Howard County don't have as much of a robust program, but they have rebates and credits on existing fees. And so we will share with you some of that information and give you links, but it's unfortunately not as good. If you live in Prince George's or Montgomery, there's much more you could do financially. And we are also going to do it. Last year, we did a Caring for Mother's Earth native plant giveaway, where because of the pandemic, we were, instead of giving them away at workshops, which was our intention, we had a drive-by based on one of the congregation's ideas, and people came and picked up native plants as a starter kit to do at home. And this year, we're going to do the same thing, but we gave it a wonderful name, Planting Hope, Native Plant Pickup Day, and it'll be May 1st at Oseh Shalom. And here's what it looked like when we did it last year. Here's some examples. We had a phenomenal turnout at one church. They even had a line. And we got the county executive to come and pick up some plants, Mark Elrich. And then you can see some of the local youth took advantage of it and advertised that they were available to do the planting at people's homes. Another group that picked them up, people loved it. It was a lot of fun. Here's some of the plants we gave away last year. So we're going to share information on what you get. Some of these we're going to give away this year. We've come up with a selection. Here's some of them. They're beautiful native plants. And what we want you to do right now, and we're going to, Linda, I believe, is going to share more about this, but what you can do right now, and you could even put it right in the chat, is pledge to plant natives. Put that right in the chat that you'll be one of the first people in your congregation to pledge to do this. Oseh Shalom, we created a a link for every congregation last year, but Oseh Shalom has again surpassed that and actually created their own pledge form, which I'm sure Linda and Sue are going to share with you, but it's beautiful and you're going to have your very own one, which is really special. So she'll will be sharing that around, but I encourage you to start by just putting your name in the chat. This is very simple. This is about doing something that will help our children and the next generation, which is amazing. They're growing up in this difficult era in so many ways, but we can make it better for them and for us. And people love parks right now. There's a huge interest in being outdoors because of the pandemic, and we can take advantage of that and really change the way we relate to the earth and help it. And I'm just really grateful for all of you to join us, and I would look forward to talking with you more when we, after Linda and Susan talk more about Oseh Shalom, and we can answer some questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Naomi and Kit, for your very inspiring and informational talks. So I'm Sue Berger. I will be doing the next presentation about our action plan that we have thought through and how we want to proceed with our Sacred Grounds program. Now that you're all so inspired to plant natives, I want to speak to our goal. Our goal is to have commitments from at least 40 OSEF family units to pledge to plant natives in their personal space. This can be the yard, an outdoor container, in your community's common space, or elsewhere. You don't need any gardening experience to do this. You just really need to want to learn and work towards healing our land. We do have educational resources, and we do have a number of people who have expertise who are willing to help. We also need other volunteers who are willing to help congregants either get more information about native plants and actually possibly to help do the physical work, to go to congregants' homes and help plant. And then of course, we'll then be putting effort into the planting at OSEF. We will come up with a plan. So on the pledge form, which there'll be a link to the pledge form in the chat. You can also, there'll be a question on that pledge form of whether or not you're able to actually help with doing the actual planting to help with other people. So let us know. And completing the pledge form is also really important because it lets us know how many people to expect so we can equitably divide up the free plants to our congregants so everyone gets some. And we think about this as a grassroots effort. So if each of us plant 3, 4, or 5 native plants, it doesn't seem like it can make that much of an impact. But if you think about 40 or 50 or however many more congregants we can get to do this in their own yards, in their own spaces, that will make a difference. There'll be more flowers for the butterflies and the bees, more berries for the birds, more habitat for insects, more solid roots in the groundwater to help stem the runoff. So the impact can really be multiplied. And something to think about is once you've planted your native plants, consider dedicating each of the plants in honor of or in memory of someone who's special to you. And that way, as you watch the plants grow and flourish, you'll have a visual reminder of that special person. So submit your pledge today, and then we can begin our journey to healing our local lands and waters. Pledge now. And I see that a lot of you already, it's like, feeling it. Wanted to talk a little bit about what we call the action plan for moving forward, which translates into the kinds of programs and events that we plan on having. As Naomi spoke about, sometime in the first week of April, there will be the a virtual presentation workshop, I believe, on the how-to of how to plant native plants. And this will help prepare you when you receive your free plants. Also in that week, in conjunction with the How to Plant Natives, April 3rd is Good Deeds Day for the Oseh Shalom Religious School. And one of the things that we're hoping to add to the mix is that we'll be giving the children native plant seeds and containers to actually sow the seeds so they can take home and nurture them, and then they will be ready to grow, to actually put in the ground in May when frost is gone and it's appropriate. Again, as Naomi mentioned, May 1, what is actually, that was new to me. We have named it Planting Hope Day. So May 1 is the day that we have designated to have our plant giveaway at Oseh, partly because this coincides loosely with the holiday of Lag BaOmer, and which is actually a few weeks later. And during Lag BaOmer, it's customary to spend the day outside and enjoy the natural beauty of the world. So people will come to pick up their reserve native, their plants that they had pledged to plant. If there haven't been pledge forms that have been received to date, we will have some there available there. So all is not lost, but we do hope that it really will help in our planning if people commit the pledge forms. And also, you know, we're hoping that we know there are a lot more Oseh members who either wanted to be and not available for this webinar, or just people that we're hoping that you can talk to your friends in the congregation and encourage them to become part of this effort, even if they're not attending this webinar. Some of the things we're looking to in the future is how we are going to develop the areas on the Oseh grounds where we can put native plants. We, excuse me, we will work with a National Wildlife Federation consultant. We have some very knowledgeable Oseh congregants as already, and we will work to identify areas on the Oseh property where the planting of native plants would have the most impact. This could be planting in areas to help mitigate water runoff, enhancing our existing pollinator garden, or developing other areas of our landscape to make them not only beautiful, but functional. Something else we're hoping to do is have a presentation by one of the local experts, whose name is Sam Droege. Some of you in the Laurel area may be familiar with. He's an expert on bees and pollinator gardens, works at the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center. We're hoping to have him come do a presentation at Oseh, possibly on a Friday night after services, during services, or on a Sunday morning. We've also applied through the National Wildlife Federation for a second year of the grant. And if this is awarded, then that could lead to many more substantial ways to improve the environment at Oseh. There's already some ideas being floated around that even children in the religious school or the some of the other, the upper school, have possibly some ideas of things that we can do on our grounds. And as Naomi mentioned, an integral part of the Sacred Grounds Project is working with our interfaith partners. She mentioned that we do have relationships in this program and otherwise with St. Mark's United Methodist Church and the Islamic Community Center of Laurel. So we hope to engage in some activities, be it maybe a joint nature walk through some native gardens, or perhaps even finding space that we can work together at each other's congregations to kind of sow seeds together and watch those relationships flourish and grow. Wanted to make sure that you all are aware that we have a really fabulous new Sacred Grounds webpage that Linda and Melody Magnus have created. It can be accessed from our homepage under the About heading, and we will always try to keep that updated with event information. And there's also already, and will continue to grow, a lot of resource links for people to check out. So that I think will be a really important go-to page for people that are interested in what's happening with sacred grounds to check out. And of course, all of our events will be announced in our typical channels. So watch for information on upcoming events in the e-news and the Shalom newsletter, or we will occasionally be sending out one-off e-blasts as events get closer. I also wanted to share information about an online event that Rabbi Daria made us aware of, and it's actually kicking off tomorrow for the next 4 days. It's called the Big Bold Jewish Climate Fest, and the link to their website should also be in the chat. This is described as an online festival to connect our Jewish values to action in order to address our current climate crisis and to make climate change a central moral issue in the Jewish community. They will just be having, they will be hosting online workshops, as well as funneling information of other organizations that may be having similar to us. We actually posted a link about our webinar today. I'm not sure if anybody actually, we did have a number of registrants register for it. I'm not sure if you're out there, but welcome if you are. But there seems to be some really interesting sessions. It's free. You do have to register, but there's no cost involved. Let us know if anybody actually attends that, and if there's some good information that you'd like to share about doing so. I think it's, as I said, it starts tomorrow, and I think it lasts for 4 days, and the workshops are throughout the days and in the evenings. Also, we excuse me, we welcome more people on the Sacred Grounds team. Anybody that wants to join us, has ideas. If you don't want to make a commitment on being on the team, but if you have some thoughts or ideas of other activities or other ways we can engage, we'd love to hear your suggestions. So contact Linda or I. We do have a Sacred Grounds email address that will also be in the link. It's sacred.grounds@osashalom.org. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We hope that you learned a lot, and that even though for most of us, this is just the beginning of our journey into the world of planting natives, we do hope that this webinar has piqued your interest even more, and you're ready to sign the pledge, dig in literally and figuratively, get your hands dirty and get to work. The link to the pledge is again in the chat, or you can find it on the Sacred Grounds webpage. Thanks again to Naomi Edelson and Kit Gage. Their expertise is obvious and evident, and we are very, very fortunate to be working with them on this project. We hope you'll stay on the Zoom for a question and answer session with Naomi and Kit, and they'll do their best to answer the questions that you have. Please, we're going to manage this in several ways. Put your questions in the chat or raise your Zoom hand, and you'll be called on to unmute yourself and ask a question. To find your Zoom hand, you can hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen, and depending on which version of Zoom you have, click on either the reaction button or the participants button, and you'll see a raise hand icon. Once your question is answered or addressed, I think you'll need to manually go back in and lower the hand. And if all else fails, just raise your hand in the screen and we'll do our best to call on you. Thanks again for joining us, and we really look forward to receiving your pledges, working with you, and as we move forward on this joint venture. So Yasher Koach to everybody. Thank you.
So did you want me to quickly show the OSA webpage?
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, if you haven't already, that would be great.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
just quickly, you guys are welcome to explore it at leisure. This is on the OSA site. The link is there, but it's under, just go to the OSA site and it's under About, right up here. And you can explore it for yourself and get more links and learn more if you're interested.
Let's give our OSE thank you to Sue and Linda and Melody and Kit and Naomi and to all of you. This is really so exciting. And for those of you who may say, well, we have a pollinator garden and actually 2 rain gardens at OSE, and we have an edge wildlife habitat. What are we doing this for? Hopefully you can see that the footprint of our building is still huge. And as you notice, when it rains, there is still water that pools in different areas. And we do have a good amount of pavement still and roof runoff possibilities. So there is so much more potential. And there is such an exciting possibilities for a coherence that we have not yet applied to our congregation and our community that again can spread out as we inspire our friends, our neighbors, our families, wherever they are. So thank you again for participating, and I look forward to hearing the Q&As for Naomi and Kit.
So feel free, as Sue said, and thank you again to all of our speakers, but put in questions either in the chat or you can raise your hand and we will we'll get going with questions and answers. Who wants to be first?
There were 2 questions already put in the chat that I think Kit could answer.
Okay.
Right. I just answered the question about how easy native plants are to survive from people who are worried that they have don't have green thumbs. And the general answer, I mean, one can kill any plant if you try hard enough, but native plants grow here, and so they are somewhat less sensitive to the vicissitudes of our climate. Though the worse that gets, all bets are off. But it's in general they're a lot easier to establish, and in general they just do better, and they will do better. You don't have to amend the soil as much to change it to what those plants would prefer. You don't have to use pesticides or fertilizers to get them to grow, because they do grow here. Some of them grow really well. But the other thing is about deer, where, some people say, well, there's this list of of plants that deer won't eat. And I think that's not an accurate way of presenting this. Deer will eat just about anything when they're hungry enough. But what you want to plant are things that deer are not going to go to first. It's the things that they're less likely to eat. So that, and we have chosen specifically to have plants to give you plants that are somewhat deer resistant, that they just tend to be less likely to eat. I mean, there's some that they will almost never eat, like ferns. Ferns are a great deer plant, because I can think of once we have a deer super highway in our backyard, abutting the park, and I've got a bunch of ferns, and I think I've seen them browse them once in 25 years. So, but we're not giving you ferns. We're giving you other things that are better for pollinator plants. Yeah, imperfect gardens. That's, yeah. We're not seeking perfection here. We're seeking plants that will support the biome, that that butterflies will go to, that ants will pollinate, that all the different kind of the bees and various bugs, and as well as butterflies and birds will need for their food and for pollination and for taken back to their hives and all of that.
So there are a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. I don't know how many people are following the chat, but it has to do with rain gardens. And Naomi has provided some explanation that we can learn more about rain gardens at the how-to workshop, and assess whether that is something that would be good for your particular property. I also wanted to mention that for some people, they don't have a yard or a large yard, and so planting in containers is also useful. So if you have the ability to put out a container and you can plant a native plant in that, and that would be also a contribution to helping our environment.
Right, like plants in pots slow the flow, just like a rain barrel would do. So that's still important work. And as Naomi said, the traditional rain garden involved removing a lot of soil from the ground and making a really big depression, a little bit like Naomi's temple had. But you don't have to do that in your yard. You can make a small depression, which some call a conservation landscape, and plant it up, and you're still capturing a huge amount of stormwater in that kind of planting. Somebody asked the question about Algonquians and what they did to support stormwater. I mean, to keep the rainwater infiltrating. And I think the biggest answer is they didn't cut down all the trees. I mean, that's what happened that really has destroyed the natural balance of rainwater flowing into the ground, and that's what we're seeking to try to mitigate. And sometimes, when you saw the pervious pavers in the picture I showed, that's an unnatural way to handle stormwater that we're doing to try to still have our surfaces where cars will park or people will have their barbecues or whatever, and still allow the water to infiltrate. So we're doing a lot of more complicated kinds of structures that are more expensive to try to do that. Those of you if you come to the tour of my neighborhood, will see a Green Streets project that Montgomery County DEP and the Department of Transportation put in, that have all sorts of really complicated and expensive projects to capture the water from the roadway. But in your yards, you can do much simpler things. You can plant trees, as many as you can possibly accommodate in your yards, and shrubs. Those are really helpful, and they don't require as much care as perennials might. So there are lots of different options that are relatively simple and can be done on a very human scale.
Gwen, you had Gwen, I saw in the chat, had a question. Do you want to pose your question, Gwen?
Sure. I was wondering if you could discuss non-native invasive removal. I've been pulling vines, Oriental bittersweet, and honeysuckle, the Japanese honeysuckle, from trees on our property. But is it ever appropriate to, say, bring a saw along on a hike and just cut whenever we happen to see it elsewhere? Because I know the bittersweet is everywhere.
Yeah.
Once you start seeing these, you can't stop seeing them.
Right.
It's a problem.
No, I know. It's an interesting problem. One of the things that in Montgomery County, they have a program that Parks runs called Weed Warriors, where they train people, because they don't want to just send people out with their saws cutting everything down. In fact, somebody in Sligo a few months ago did that, and they ended up cutting down some native grapevines and poison ivy, both of which are native, one of which could have given the person a lot of grief, but that birds use for food. So the idea is to get trained to know what you're looking for before you start doing that. And there are some sort of neighborhood projects that do some of the same thing, that mostly are focused on ivy, which I think basically on a neighborhood level, that's the biggest risk, because a lot of people plant ivy, and then it goes up trees and can be really terrible it can kill a tree. And certainly the weight of it can pull down branches. It blocks the sunlight eventually from the tree, and it also triggers bug growth in the bark that gets hidden from view. So I wouldn't just take a saw out if you don't know what you're looking at well enough. Don't take that saw out. But certainly, I mean, in your own yard, you probably know what you got. And that's absolutely great. Promoting to neighbors to do the same thing is a really important thing to do.
One more note on that. Most of our non-native invasives seem to have been imported originally as ornamental plants. And as a result, right now, I mean, most of them are Asian, and now I have a problem because it seems I'm always trying to kill the Oriental bittersweet, the Japanese honeysuckle, basically all these Asian names, and I'm starting to feel like I'm being racist. Do we have, I guess should we address them with scientific names instead? It's just a personal problem of mine, I guess.
Well, the problem with, I mean, English ivy is not Asian. Just saying, but you don't have to. I mean, a lot of these things were imported by gardeners from all sorts of places. But one of the reasons why England and Japan and China were such big places where things came from is because their climate's somewhat similar. But the problem with those plants, by and large, is they don't have. Nobody eats them. Deer don't eat ivy by and large. They don't eat the Japanese honeysuckle. So that's part of why they go crazy, is because they have no predators. And so that's the core. That's really the core issue, is everything, almost all native plants will have some things that eat them, and not necessarily to the ground, but will eat them. You can have a balance, you end up with a relative balance of animals and plants and bugs and all that stuff that are feeding off of each other but surviving. Whereas with ivy, for example, it's pretty immune. So I think that's the science, is that they don't have predators.
Peter and Naomi, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the impact on us humans on not having the birds and the butterflies in the way. Like, maybe more people have probably heard about bees and the impact as pollinators, but it can be heartbreaking to read that or hear those statistics and see those pictures and imagine what that means kind of as an overall picture of the environment, the world that we live in. But other than it being a sad thing, what's the actual impact on us and our community, in the world, on human beings? I think that kind of personal bringing it down could be helpful.
Well, I mean, at its core, to the extent that we eat vegetables and fruits all have to be pollinated, and the way that we're using pesticides and growing plants that are particular plants that are immune to pesticides, so that we can then spray them and kill all the pollinators, as well as anything that people think are going to be bad for those plants. That is that's shooting ourselves in the foot as humans. So in the very in some ways short-sighted rationale for why we need to grow plants that have why we need to support pollinators, it's if we got no vegetables and fruits, we're goners. That's the core. There's all sorts of other quality of life issues of all these things growing around us, and that it will make, if there aren't all those plants around us, even on a stormwater matter, you've got to have those plants to capture and absorb stormwater. You can't, if you pave everything, it's just, life will not work.
Yeah, thank you. I had heard the statistic of like 1 in every 3 bites we take, right? And think about a bite, right? Not like plate, like 1 in every 3 meals, but 1 in every 3 bites is thanks to pollinators. But I wonder about birds also, like, people will think of pollinators often as maybe, okay, so I guess there's butterflies and, and ants and smaller creatures, but birds are nice and they eat the caterpillars, and they're nice to look at and to hear. What do they have to do about what's our interconnection and relationship like with birds?
Naomi, you want to field that?
Well, birds are also obviously pollinators too, because all the fruit and the seeds, the fruit they eat, which is not the protein, but they still need it for the carbs and things like that, that they obviously help seed, plant produce, spread the seed around. But, birds are really important because they also eat a lot of the insects that are what we call pests. And so all these flycatchers, which are in real trouble, a lot of the birds that eat insects are actually in a lot of trouble too. And Sam Droege, when you have him speak, the way I first met him was through birds. He and I did a lot of bird conservation work together 25 years ago. So he's been a pioneer in that and now turned his attention to bees. But I think that there's tremendous, birds are a very important part of making sure there are plants, all different places that can go much farther than insects do usually. And they do provide a lot of joy in our lives.
One interesting thing that birds do, they eat certain fruits that are very small and hard that otherwise wouldn't have a way to distribute their seeds and germinate. So they eat the pulp, and I saw this at that Howard County Nature Center that Linda mentioned. They scratch the coating of the seeds so that those seeds will be able to disperse when they otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are amazing number of seeds which require fire or heat or cold, or sort of the acid from like birds' digestive systems to scarify is the term, to have them germinate. So not only, as you say, that they spread seed further, but they also are required. Otherwise, you just plant a seed down below the tree or plant, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to germinate.
The good news is there really is, if we do take actions together, we can really make a difference. And I've worked with wildlife biologists all across the country, and like the bald eagle is one of the most successful evidence of that. It took a concerted effort and it took decades, but we can see the bald eagle fairly frequently now. I saw it in Rock Creek Park. I couldn't believe it, actually there. I was surprised. And it's not uncommon to see them in this region. And so we hope to do some nature walks like Sue brought up. We hope we can get a second year of funding and do more things to show people how beautiful our local nature is. And that's my suggestion for another word. If you don't want to use the word native, you can say local or something like that. Indigenous is another word. I know people are concerned about that language, but I think it's very important to also use the word native plants, because when you go into a nursery and ask for the native plants, you're helping them understand consumers want that. And we're trying to really change the market dramatically in that way, because people are still conditioned to think of certain plants as being beautiful. And of course, the local or indigenous plants are also very, very beautiful, but they just haven't been available, and we've not been taught to include them as part of our gardening. So I think we're trying to change the supply and demand, and it's actually happening. And I would say another great site, which we'll give you to put on your sacred grounds section of Osage Shalom, but is Dr. Doug Tallamy does the whole thing on bringing nature home, is what he calls it, and creating a home-based national park right in your own yard. And he he's really transformed things in this country. He's been a phenomenal ambassador. And we have a native plant finder on National Wildlife Federation's website where you can put in your zip code and find the very best plants. And I forgot, that'll be also in the workshop. And he's done that for the whole country now. We've given him we've helped him collect some funding, and he's found the best native plants for every zip code. And Sam Droege is doing that also with another bee expert, and we're going to also have that available by county, having the best plants for bees. And most of the bees that we're encouraging the plants to be planted for don't sting, actually. It's those honey bees and those so-called non-native bees that are the ones that are mostly sting. So I know there's issues. Adat Shalom also didn't want to put in, or some, no, it was or Kodesh didn't want to put in beehive either, whatever, stuff like that. So I understand that issue, but there's a lot you can do that won't result in stinging bees. Well, that's great, Helen, that you work with it. But yeah, we have something really special in this region. Sam Droege is a national expert. What he's doing, no one else is doing. And he's created this bee lab, and you're volunteering with him. That's great that Helen did that and Heidi brought him up. So he's really great.
Let me just add to what Naomi said, which is I love the idea, talking about your yard, your garden as being your own sort of native park, but pollinators and other animals don't just need obviously one place. And so one of the wonderful things about a community working together is you're creating corridors, because all these plants and the animals, the bugs, the birds need corridors. So so it's not just you, it's your neighbors and people 10 yards away and 100 yards away who increasingly basically connect the dots. So it's like the park, we have park corridors often in Montgomery County and other areas around here because they were harder to develop. And so we've ended up with corridors, which is great. But what we can do as individuals living near those parks is widen the corridors. So we're expanding them, and as we expand them, they support a greater number of plants and a greater variety of wildlife of all sorts, which makes for a much more healthy biome than one little corridor or one little your own personal national park.
So the Oseh Shalom Sacred Grounds page has some links that are references to some of the people and ideas mentioned today. We will continue to update that. I think there have been wonderful questions and answers during this discussion, and it inspires me to put up a frequently asked questions portion of our webpage, maybe a separate page. So thank you for being so forthright to ask your questions. And I'm sure they are the same questions that other people have.
Thank you, Linda. This is Helen. I want to thank Naomi and Kit and Daria and your whole committee. And I'm really inspired by everyone. And I have to say, this morning I went out for a very long walk and I had hundreds of robins in my yard. And I was following where they were going. And weirdly, they were eating all the Bradford Pear berries that were in all over all neighborhoods, along with cedar waxwings and flickers and blue jays. And it was just a really interesting mix. I was thinking about Gwen and her comments on invasives and how I don't know if we're ever going to totally rid our environment of them. I've been an environmental educator since I was in college. That's what I studied. And I've been very, pro natives, but I've also observed what's happened with, the fact that we brought in multiflora rose and we brought in a lot of these invasive vines and stilt grass, et cetera. And, I'm dismayed. I'm constantly trying to remove them, but they keep coming back. And I do see, that they don't feed a lot of caterpillars, but right now in the dead of winter, they're feeding hundreds and hundreds of birds, which is very weird to me. I was just observing that this morning. And you know, they're going to be constantly proliferating them. But what we can do is just constantly replanting these native plants to counteract and hopefully to overcome, you know, the onslaught of invasives that are, you know, pulling down trees like the Oriental bittersweet. And I'm very much inspired, and I'll be happy to help on the committee. I'm actually doing seminars after seminars on, you know, the landscape design and working with Bee City and Howard County. So I have planted. I was the head of the Social Action Committee long time ago, and I used to plant trees at Osay, and the ground there is very clay-like. Even though it's not your regular, like just hard pan soil, it's gray, like, you know, it has that Cretaceous period, you know, that had the dinosaurs in it. And it's got this weird clay. I don't know if we're going to have to really take a look at the soil there, and possibly we might have to do a little amending. I'm not sure on that, but I've had to put a fence around some of my native plants here at my house, because they, unless it's a mint or a goldenrod or certain plants, some of them do get really nibbled down. So you have to probably do some experimenting with what is palatable and not palatable to the herbaceous herbivory of the Osay landscape there. But thank you all.
Well, we're excited to have you join our team.
Yeah, you're hired.
We meet via Zoom on the first Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. And so your ideas and knowledge will be most welcome. We'll contact you.
And anyone else who wants to join.
Yes, we're open to more members. Anyone with a heart and willingness to work on this project of planting native and encouraging others, you're more than welcome. We will need lots of support with terms of the giveaway and our own efforts at Osay. There's a ton of ideas being suggested, and part of our effort will be in deciding what to do first and how big a project we want to take, and getting whatever ideas we have designed to a point where we can present it to different groups at Osay that need to review it and approve it. So there's lots and lots to do.
Before we go, at 12:30, as all the Osay members are invited to join us for a Shemitah study with Rabbinic intern Farron. The link is in your e-news and on the website, and there'll be a pickle making session that you're invited to as part of that also. It'll begin 45 minutes later if you want to attend either half.
Oh,
there won't be a password needed for that. The 7515 regular password, I believe, is probably going to be needed for that. But yes, we'll come for either the text study or the pickling or both. Naomi, sorry to interrupt you.
no, I think my husband might want to do the pickling. I'm going to tell him.
Great. Okay. There's a supply list too. So do check. I believe the supply list is probably on there as well. But if you want to see, it'll be some vegetable pickling. So you know.
It's pretty basic stuff. You can use, but if you don't have the vegetables there, you can substitute whatever you have in your drawer.
Exactly. Probably got carrots and onions or something. So garlic. Some salt. So thank you all again so much. This is really so exciting, and it's so inspiring to think about, right, that as Linda, as you just lifted up, and Sue, you mentioned also the possibilities for us to do things, from the bats and revisiting the bees and right the waterways and so many different possibilities. And we can do a lot simultaneously if we have different teams kind of moving forward, different aspects of it, or we can do fewer things kind of going for it all together. It's up to what you feel like helping to make happen, and at what role feels comfortable for you to help make something happen at this point. Whether it's just, I'm gonna, stay tuned and show up on the webinars, or I have an idea and I want to help see how I can make this grow.
We're going to get cut off in 2 minutes, Rabbi Daria, and I want to give people a little chance to grab some lunch before the next session.
Great. So
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Melody, for hosting.
Thank you. Great hosting, Melody.
And thanks again to Naomi and Kit.